Our story takes place a long time ago in the ancient Holy Lands in a village. And in this village, there lived a rich man. And like everyone else in his village, he went faithfully to Shabbat services on Sunday morning, but he slept through them. Yeah. Saturday. Did I say Sunday? I definitely meant Saturday. Thank you. So, by the way, if you doze during this service, I never take offense, okay? It just tells me you're feeling relaxed and you need a little bit of rest here. So this man would sleep through the service, but one Saturday morning, as he was drifting to slumber, he heard a portion of the Torah from Leviticus in which God instructs the children of Israel to place 12 loaves of challah bread on the table in the tabernacle. And when the service ended, this man woke up and he didn't realize that what he heard was part of the service. He thought he had had a divine encounter in his dreams. And he thought that God had asked him to bake 12 loaves of challah and to bring them to his temple and place them on the bima, the front of the synagogue, the sacred part, that this was his divine job. And he thought, well, I better get on that. So after the Sabbath ended, the next day, he and his family baked these 12 loaves of challah and he brought them to the temple and he placed them on the bima and he left. Now, shortly after, there was a gentleman at the temple, and he had a job at the temple. He cleaned the temple for a living. But he was having a really hard time and a struggle in his life because the government of their village in the ancient lands had just cut off this really important benefit in their community that helped people get food. And he was struggling. And as he was cleaning, he offered up a prayer to God. And he said, God, I don't know how I'm going to feed my family without this benefit, and I just don't know what I'm going to do. And as he was dusting, he noticed something really strange and miraculous. There were 12 loaves of challah in front of him. And he thought, a true miracle right in this moment, God, you have delivered this food for my family. So he piled up these 12 loaves of challah and he put them in a bag and he took them home to his family, and they even had enough to share with their neighbors. Well, the next Saturday when it was time for services, this wealthy man in the village, he was really into tech. He got there and he crept up. He got there early so he could see if the bread was there, and he noticed the bread was gone. And he thought, God loved my challah. He took it. Clearly, I need to continue to make this. So the next day, sure enough, he rounded up the family and they baked the bread, and this time they added raisins. He brought the bread back. The janitor from the temple came in to do his cleaning. He found the bread. The miracle continues. And it went on like this for a few weeks. Until one day, the rabbi of the temple was having a really hard day. Maybe it was like budget season in the village. And he went into the main part of the temple to pray, to rest, to be in the sacred presence of God. And he looked up, and in total shock, he saw the gentleman who normally slept through the whole service creep up to the bima and take out of his bag 12 loaves of challah. And the rabbi knew enough just to stay quiet and see what happened. And then he observed shortly after his colleague, the person who helped keep the synagogue clean and orderly, come in and take the bread. And the rabbi thought, what is going on here? Let's all get together and figure this out. So he invited them to come to his office. and he said to this very wealthy man, "Do you know what's happening to your challah bread?" The wealthy man said, "Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but God is taking my challah." And the rabbi looked at his colleague, the janitor, who looked at the rich man and said, "Wait a second, you're bringing the bread? I thought God was delivering me the bread." And they both looked sort of disappointed and sad because they thought they were partaking of a miracle. And the rabbi said, "No, no, no. What makes you think this isn't a miracle?" And he looked to his congregant and he said, "Who's to say that yours aren't the hands of God making the bread?" And to his colleague, he said, "Who's to say yours are not the hands of God receiving?" And that is our story. Should we just go home? I kind of think that was the sermon for the day, but there's more. So we're going to come back to this continent, and we're going to come to this century. But we're going to go back a few years in time to a warm spring evening. And on this night, I extended my hand to my seminary friend, Julia, who took my hand in hers and she smudged it with dark black ink. This is what seminarians get up to for fun. We were actually just starting out our ministries, and we were on retreat together, and a creative member of our group had designed this ritual for us to affirm our commitment to our new vocations. And our friend who designed it said that by extending our hands, we were signaling our intention to use them, and by extension, our whole selves for the good of those we'd served. And then by blotting them with ink, we were honoring that the work of ministry, like life, can be messy. Or as the poet Marge Piercy puts it, the work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands and crumbles. Right before I offered my hand to my friend Julia, she turned to me and she said, "Mara, we are called to serve. Will you serve?" Yes. So I'm going to say to us all this morning, we are called to serve. Will you serve? Yes. Okay. Decades before that little group of baby ministers gathered, a young pastor preached a sermon with what I think is a similar message. Drawing on the ancient Gospel of Mark, he said to his congregation, "If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he or she or they who is greatest among you shall be your servant." And that is a new definition of greatness. Anyone know who that preacher was? Thank you. Yes, Dr. King, Martin Luther King. In the States, Dr. King is known for that extraordinary, almighty, "I have a dream" speech. But one of my favorite texts by him is this sermon he preached from the pulpit of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is the church not only where he preached as an adult, but where he was baptized as a child. And he called this sermon the drum major instinct. Has anyone heard this sermon before? Some of you have, some of you haven't. So Dr. King preached that morning that the drum major instinct, or do we have any drum majors in the room? We have a drum major in the room, we do. All right, you'll lead us out to coffee hour later. Okay. So he said, this is part of the human condition. In modern parlance, I think what we'd say is we need to be seen, right? Like we need to be seen and acknowledged and known by our compatriots. But Dr. King was saying that no matter who we are, we all have this need. We want to kind of have our chance to be at the front of the parade. And he said there's nothing we can do about that. But what we can do is we can choose to be out of the front of the parade for something that is really important and really meaningful. And that is serving other people, he said. King was drawing on a little text part from the Gospel of Mark that said, "Whoever will be greatest among you shall be your servant." And he told his people this morning that that is the definition of greatness. Now, 2 hours away where I live in Vermont, the word great has become a little tainted. Does anyone know why? You know why. I don't need to say anything else, do I? No. Okay. Well, I will say a little bit. That version of greatness is a worldview that to me is the antithesis of what Jesus was preaching in the Gospels. And 2 weeks ago in the States, that version of greatness looked like turning off food benefits for 42 million people. 42 million people. Ooh, okay. So on Thursday, October 30th, I received this email from a fellow mom at my kids' school. It was written by someone else. "Hi, friends. I'm sure you're aware that on November 1st, families who are receiving Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits will no longer be receiving this money to buy the food they need. Fortunately, the state of Vermont is stepping in. That's a true story. But there will be a 5 to 6 day delay. And even then, families will only receive half of what they typically do for the month. Significant delays in the distribution of benefits means that families will not have the money they need to purchase food for their children between November 1st and November 6th. Picture a single parent with 5 or more kids who might have gotten $1,000 on November 1st, now receiving $0 until November 5th to 7th. As many of you know, my wife works as a social worker at one of the schools in Vermont with the highest number of students qualifying for free lunch in our state, an economic indicator of poverty. And my wife is too busy at work to make emergency plans right now, so I will. I made a note. This is a really good husband. Tomorrow on Halloween, she wants to send as many kids home with grocery store gift cards as possible for the weekend where these benefits will not be distributed. Can you chip in to purchase grocery store gift cards as possible, as many as possible, to support the families through this difficult moment? We are called to serve. Will you serve? For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to see me. Those are some ancient words, but they still speak to us, don't they? And they move us because they ring true. But they're not some miraculous accomplishment or a grand heroic gesture, right? which makes me think back to Deirdre Sullivan in her essay and her life philosophy of making small gestures rather than big heroic ones, doing something good when you could easily do nothing. And to me, that's a really great definition of service. And here I suspect, because you already answered the question, will you serve, right at the beginning of the sermon, I already know I'm preaching to the converted here this morning, because as Unitarian Universalists, what binds us together isn't a shared creed that we say together, but it's our commitment to share in acts of love and service. We are about doing the something good, service berries. I see a room of service berries here with me today. The rabbi reminds us of this in the story I told earlier, that regardless of what our theology is, whether we identify as atheist or theist, whether we are Buddhist or Jewish or Christian or dyed-in-the-wool Unitarian, we share an understanding that when we act in love, we are doing something sacred. And that's what the rabbi was getting at when he talked to his two congregants in the room. But there's a piece of this story that I want to pull out a thread here as we come to the finish. It struck me when the rabbi said to the wealthy man, is it time to end? No. For a second, I was like, the hook is here. Everyone needs their coffee. So the part where the rabbi says to the wealthy man, yours are the hands of God making the bread. Right, okay, yes, serving. But what about the part where he says to the man receiving the bread, yours are also the hands of God? I want to hold that as an invitation, especially for those of us who either our vocation or our volunteerism have the great privilege of serving others regularly, which is a risk that if we get calcified in our role of being the ones who serve the others, number one, it might be hard to accept help for ourselves. Is there anyone here who has a little trouble accepting help? Raise hands. I'll raise my hand. So there's that, but there's also a risk that unconsciously we might start to feel like that's us, the ones who do the serving, and that maybe we're a little more worthy or a little more organized or a little more whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? But if we remember in and through our serving that we too are human, that we too are vulnerable, that we too will be, in some other ancient language, the least of these, then when we serve, we do it in a spirit of shared love and justice that affirms our connectedness, and that brings us closer together. Heart to heart, Andrew, heart to heart. So when Dr. King closed that sermon, The Drum Major Instinct, he closed that sermon by saying that at his funeral, he did not want his eulogizers to say that he was a Nobel Prize recipient or that he won hundreds of awards. He preached he'd like them to say instead, I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to say that I did try in my life to visit those who are in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. And when King was laid to rest, only 2 months later, martyred as he was, that sermon played at his funeral, where rows of inconvenienced people gladly filled the pews to honor him and his message of love, justice, and service. If you want to be great, wonderful, but let us recognize that those who are greatest among us will be our servants, and that is the definition of greatness. We are called to serve. Will you serve? Put your hands out. Show me your beautiful hands. May it be so, now and in the days to come. Amen.